All right, good afternoon, everyone. Bear with me just a moment here while I get our stage set up so everyone can see me. All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's live cooking demonstration. My name is Ryan Smith. I am the Wellness Program Administrator here at Georgia State University, and by trade, I am a registered dietitian. Before we get started today, just a few quick things. We are going to be recording today's session, so if you'd like to view it again later, share it with a colleague or anything like that, it will be uploaded and made available on our EDWS YouTube page. Additionally, during today's session, if you've got questions, comments, ideas, anything like that, we'd love to hear from you. Go ahead and use that chat feature on the right side of your WebEx screen to share any thoughts you might have. We'll be sure to keep an eye on that, and then at the end of today's session, we'll address any comments that may have popped up. If during the presentation you have any issues with video or sound, please do me a favor and send a message to all panelists. I will be, of course, cooking during today's session, so if you have any issues, sending the message to all panelists will allow Tony Pilote to be able to see your message and troubleshoot any issues that you might be having. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So today we're going to be making red lentil fritters with a ginger yogurt sauce. So this is an interesting recipe. It's using the term fritters, though when I look at all the ingredients that go into this, this is basically like a falafel dish, but rather than using chickpeas, we're going to be making use of lentils, which are an incredibly healthy food, and we're going to talk all about them today. In terms of equipment, you are going to need a stovetop over here, so I'll be using that. You'll see me move from here to the stove and back and forth a couple times. But other than that, you're going to want a food processor of some sort. If you don't have a Ninja or a traditional food processor, you can get by with a blender. You may need to just run it a little bit more since the blades typically don't go quite as high depending on what type of blender you have. If you don't have a food processor, I highly recommend them. They save a lot of time when it comes to working on dishes like this. And then otherwise, cutting board and a knife, those will be the main tools we'll use today. In terms of ingredients, we're going to kind of talk through them as we get to them. There's actually not a ton of active ingredient prep that we'll have to do today, which is nice, but there was a little bit that I had to do before today's session began. Now, when you use lentils, you are able to cook them, and you actually don't need to soak them. I'm buying dried lentils, but for today's recipe, we did want to soak them because it's going to soften them up since we're using a little bit of a different process today. So we are using 1 cup of dried lentils, which I soaked for 4 hours in 4 cups of water. And this will all be in the recipe that we'll be sending out to you, so you can make use of that later to follow those instructions a little more clearly. But 1 cup of dried lentils, and you want to soak it for at least 4 hours, or you can do overnight, which might be convenient if you're just trying to plan ahead a little bit. That allows the lentils to get a little bit of moisture in them. They sort of swell a little bit and expand in size, and then we're going to be able to work with them. So that's what we're going to be doing with the lentils today. That's a step that I already took care of in preparation. So once you've got your lentils, we're actually just going to add them directly into the food processor. And you can see that the 1 cup expands quite a bit in volume when it soaks up that water. So it really looks more like 2 or 3 cups now after soaking it overnight. So we'll get those in there. And what we're going to do is we're going to be adding ingredients to give these lentils flavor. They're going to make up the main body of the fritters that we're making. So I'm going to use scallions or green onions as another ingredient here. And whenever you're preparing the scallions, you want to go ahead and rinse them beforehand like you would any other vegetable. And we are going to cut off the very ends of them here, these white parts where it kind of grows from at that base. That part doesn't have a lot of flavor in it, so I'm going to kind of start at the green and just remove the excess there. So we'll go ahead and discard those. Then we're going to finely chop them. Now we are going to be running it through the food processor, so your chopping doesn't have to be perfect. It'll get kind of a little chopped up by the food processor anyway, but try to do it into as small pieces as you can. Just moving the scallions towards the knife like so. Making sure to watch your fingers as you do it. We're using that curled finger grip to protect the tips there. All right. And we are using a bunch of scallions. When you buy them at the grocery store, you should see them in, usually they're in groups of 6, and that's exactly how many we need. We're going to use 2/3 of what we chop up to put in here, and the rest we're actually going to add into the ginger yogurt sauce. So I'm going to actually just eyeball this, and we're going to take about 2/3. So we're going to use most of it, leaving a little bit behind to put in the yogurt sauce later. And we've got that in the food processor. Okay. The next thing we're going to add is our chopped onion. You're just going to want half of a medium onion that you've chopped up. I always pre-chop onions for the cooking demonstrations. I'm sure some of you who have attended before have heard me talk about this. I tear up really badly when I cut onions. It's a total mess. My sinuses run, all that good stuff. So onions are pre-chopped to save you and me the embarrassment of all that stuff running down my face. So we've got the onions in there. And now let's add some flavor to it. So we're going to do 1 teaspoon of, this is a red curry powder. You can buy this with any other seasonings there. We're going to do a teaspoon of that. We're going to do half a teaspoon of cumin. And then a 1/4 teaspoon of turmeric. Okay, and I'm not sure if my mic's picking up on it, but my roommate's cat is doing laps around the apartment right now, meowing. So if you hear some distressed cat noises, that's where that's coming from. All right, we're going to do a 1/4 teaspoon of salt just to give it a little bit of that salty flavor there. We're going to work with salt later in the recipe, but we're just doing a small amount going into the fritters here. Okay, then we're going to do, you can do a clove of fresh garlic, or if you're like me and you like the convenience of minced garlic, we're going to do half a teaspoon because that's equal to 1 fresh clove. Right. And then the next ingredient, so we've got these lentils. If you've ever worked with falafel before or something like this, you blend it all together, but there's not a lot to help it kind of stick together. You need a binder of some sort. And that's where the egg is going to come into play. So today's recipe is a vegetarian recipe. It is not fully vegan. We are making use of an egg. You can get by using egg replacers for certain things like this to help bind ingredients, but I'm just going to be using a traditional egg today. So you can make that decision yourself at home if you're someone who might be looking to follow a fully vegan diet. So we are going to use the egg to add it in there, and I'm actually going to crack it over this dish just in case, because you never know when you're going to get little bits of shell. All right, we did a good job cracking that, so I'm going to go ahead and add that in. Okay. All right, and then the final ingredient is going to be an optional one. I'm going to move these scallions out of the way. The final ingredient is going to be cilantro. And the reason I say it's optional is I know cilantro is a love it or hate it thing for a lot of people. Some people say it kind of tastes soapy to them. Other people really, really enjoy the flavor of it. So I will leave that entirely up to you. If you do want to make use of cilantro, we're going to do just a small amount, about a 1/4 cup chopped up that we'll add in there just to get a little bit of that robust cilantro flavor. When you are working with cilantro, you've got the stems here and you've got the little leaves. We want to not get a ton of the stem in it if we can avoid it. There are a couple ways to go about this. You can use the knife to kind of scrape the leaves off. Honestly, sometimes what I'll do is if I'm being quick and lazy, I will just cut near the top where it's mostly leaves anyway, and then you can go and pick apart some of those leaves by hand. It's really up to you however you want to get the leaves off of there, but again, the goal is to remove the really large pieces of stem. They won't hurt you to eat. They're just a little stiff, a little fibrous in a way that you may not find super pleasant. Now, because we're running it through a food processor, it's mostly going to get pulverized anyway, so I'm not too worried about it. But now I'm just going to group the cilantro together. I tend to kind of pinch it into as tight of a shape as I can, and then I just rock the knife over it like so. And that cuts it up a little bit, and we'll sprinkle that in to get some of that flavor. Again, though, if you're not a fan of cilantro, I would honestly just leave this out. I've made this recipe before with and without cilantro, and it tastes just as good without it, in my opinion. You still get a lot of really nice flavors. So it's not a make or break kind of thing by any means. So let me make sure we've got the garlic, we've got the curry powder, the cumin, the turmeric, the salt. We did the scallions, 2/3 of them. We did the cilantro, and we've got the lentils and the onions. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to put the lid on top of the food processor here. And you're going to just pulse it until it's smooth. Now you may need to stop at some point and use a spatula to scrape down the sides a little bit and make sure it's all coming into contact with the blade. And I apologize, it's going to be a little loud while we do this, so bear with me. And I can see, and hopefully you can see on the camera, yeah, it's really riding up the edges here, which is totally normal. You just take that spatula, you can see how it's scooting it down, and that'll push it all closer together. You want this to be pretty finely blended and ground up so that all the flavors are mixed together, so that the egg, because we're using that as a binder, is in contact with all of the mixture. So we'll scoop it down, and then we're going to run it again here. Okay. Yeah, now that's looking pretty good. And I'll try to show you a little bit of a closer look at what that's going to look like. Give me just a second here. So hopefully you can see that mixture. Again, if you've made falafel before, this should look very familiar to you. We've just swapped out the chickpeas for the lentils. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put this in the refrigerator. If you're making this at home, you're going to want to refrigerate this for at least 10 minutes. Emphasis on at least. The longer you refrigerate it for, it's going to get colder, and it's just going to bind and stick together a little better. When you first blend it, if you don't refrigerate it, it's kind of wet still, and you may have trouble forming the patties. So I'm going to move this into the refrigerator, and we're going to move on to some other parts of today's recipe. Okay. And I'm pulling out a pre-prepared one I've made so we can use that today to save on time. So let's talk a little bit about the nutrition of what's gone into this dish. We're working with those lentils, and lentils are incredibly healthy. They're a legume, so they're in the same family as things like beans and peas. They are a good source of healthy carbohydrates. They're very high in fiber, which can help us feel full and satisfied. It can help us with blood sugar control. It can help with weight maintenance as well, and it just helps keep us regular. So a lot of really good health benefits there, and lentils are a great source of them. They're also a good source of plant-based protein. If you're ever looking to add a little bit of protein to a dish, lentils and really any legume, beans and peas, are a nice way to do that too. And the best part is they're very, very cheap. So I bought a dried bag of lentils to work with for this recipe. It's so affordable, which is excellent if you're trying to add protein. Meat can get very expensive. So sometimes using some of these plant-based options can save you a lot of money, and it's great for your health. So what we're going to do next is we're going to make our yogurt sauce. So if you were making this at home while you were waiting on the mixture to refrigerate and cool a little bit, this would be a perfect time to get your ginger yogurt sauce going. So you're going to want a medium dish here. We're going to use a cup of yogurt. So you want the dish to ideally hold at least 2 cups, just so you've got some room to move things around. So I'm going to spoon roughly a cup of, this is plain Greek yogurt. So we don't want any flavorings for this because vanilla would probably be a little strange. This is a very savory dish, though. Who knows? Maybe that's something that you would enjoy. Maybe you like that kind of flavor combination. I can't say I've tried it, but we're just doing a plain Greek today because we're going to add our own flavor to it. So 1 cup of the plain Greek yogurt, which is going to add some additional protein as well as some calcium to our dish, which is nice, trying to round out that nutrient profile. So once you've got your 1 cup of plain Greek yogurt, we are going to add a tablespoon of lime juice. You can use fresh lime juice if you'd like, or you can just use the bottled kind. I know that's very convenient. Then we're going to do a half a teaspoon of ground ginger. Sprinkle that on there. Okay. Then I mentioned we're going to use salt one more time. So we're going to do a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And then the scallions that we saved from earlier, the remaining 1/3, we're just going to sprinkle those in there. It's partially for flavor. It's also kind of a visual. If you've ever had a dip before and you kind of see the scallions garnished on top, a lot of times it just gives it some color variety that's nice. And then you can use a whisk if you want. I'm just going to use a spoon here today. And we're going to stir in the lime juice, the ginger, and the salt because we want it to mix evenly with the rest of the Greek yogurt. And Greek yogurt is such a great base for sauces and things like this. I mean, you can just eat it as yogurt. You can use it as a sour cream replacement, but it works great in whenever you're making dips. It's such a healthy way to start, and then you can add your own flavor to it. So it's something I like to work with a lot. Okay, so we've got that stirred in there. And what I'm going to do for our next step is I'm actually going to scoot some of this stuff off the cutting board, clear a little bit of space. And if you're making it at home, like I said, you'd want to wait that full 10 minutes minimum for your lentil mixture to cool in the fridge. This is some that I pre-prepared to speed things up. So once you're done, you can get it out of the food processor and you should have that mixture there. And what we're going to do is we're going to form patties now that we're going to then cook on the stovetop. So if you want to be exact, each patty should be roughly 3 tablespoons. And that will allow you to get a total of 12 of these, which is the full recipe, out of your mixture. You can also eyeball it. What I often do is I'll measure the first one and say, okay, that's what about 3 tablespoons looks like, and then just kind of build from there. You are going to get your hands a little messy for this, so I'll warn you that. And what you want to do is just ball them together. And if you try to do this before refrigerating, like I said, they'll be a little too wet. Even now, they're still moist, but we're going to make them into little ball shapes. And then using half a cup of all-purpose flour, you're just going to want to put it in a little container like this and spread it out. And then we're going to gently roll the red lentil fritter in there and then flatten it into a little patty, like so. Okay? So I'm just going to set those on the cutting board for now. And emphasis on the gentle rolling. We are working, if you make this at home, you'll see this is a delicate mixture. It's pretty easy for it to come apart. So we really want to ball it together as tightly as we can. And then once we think we've got it in that ball shape again, we want to be gentle as we roll it through the flour. The flour is going to allow it to cook a lot better on the stove. Because they're fritters, we're sort of frying, we're basically frying them. But all the ingredients on the inside are very healthy, so we're balancing it out. We're using healthier fats to cook them in, so we still get a lot of that flavor, but with some good nutrition. And just to save on time today, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cook 3 of them to demonstrate what this will look like. Okay, so again, we've got our little ball here, and your hands will get progressively messier as you go. I keep a towel nearby. I've got one right here below the counter that I can wipe my hands on. So again, we ball it up with some flour, and then we flatten it a little bit, and I'm setting it on the cutting board there. Okay. I'm going to wipe my hands off real quick. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move to the stovetop over here. You're just going to want a medium to large size skillet. We're going to put 2 tablespoons of a heart-healthy oil. You can use canola oil. You could use avocado oil, olive oil, anything like that is going to be a good choice. And we're going to heat that over medium-high heat. I'm actually going to rinse my hands off here real quick too, just to get the last little bits of this off. Bear in mind that the mixture you made had raw egg added to it. So you do want to be conscious of that as you're touching other foods, other items in your kitchen. So I'm going to wash my hands here real quick. Okay. So let's get the oil heated up on our skillet. So again, we're doing 2 tablespoons of a heart-healthy oil. And we're going to heat it over a medium-high heat. And when you move your patties that you've made, you once again want to be kind of careful with it because they do have a tendency to fall apart on you. We want to be cautious of that. And I'm actually going to grab a different dish. Grab my roommate's nice pastel purple dish here. So I like to use a spatula. We're going to carefully lift them up and move them over here, because they will fall apart on you. Absolutely. If you've made falafel before at home, it's pretty easy for it to crumble. So we've got that heating, and what we're going to do is we're going to place them, again, using the spatula, delicately into the skillet, and we're going to cook for 2 minutes per side. Then we'll flip and repeat with another 2 minutes on the other side. So we'll give that about 2 minutes to cook. The trickiest part is going to be flipping those patties when the time comes. The good news is once you've cooked the first side, it browns everything and it starts to get crispy, and that helps that bottom part hold together. So there's usually enough structure for you to get the spatula under there and flip it right over and then cook the remaining side. So if you were doing these at home, not just for the sake of a demonstration, you can typically fit 6 of them in a medium to large size skillet at once. So I mentioned the recipe makes 12 total. So I'd recommend filling it with 6, cooking the one side, flipping over and cooking the other, transferring them to a plate, and then repeating with the remaining 6. You'll likely need to add another tablespoon or maybe 2 additional tablespoons of oil when you bring in the second batch. These are, with the flour and everything, going to soak up a lot of that oil, and that's intentional. These are fritters, so they're meant to have that nice fried, crispy edge. But like I mentioned, we're really balancing it out with the nutritional components happening elsewhere in the recipe. While we're waiting for that bottom side to cook just a little bit longer, let's continue to talk about the nutrition. So in terms of serving this dish, it's actually really nutritionally balanced. A serving of it has about 400 calories, and the yogurt dip combined with the fritters, it's an excellent balance of healthy carbohydrates, high quality protein, and then some fat as well. So you actually could eat just the fritters dipped in the yogurt sauce as a meal, and that could be a really enjoyable way to have it. But if you're looking to get a little more creative with it, these patties go great on top of a bed of greens if you wanted to serve it in a salad. You can also put them in a pita pocket and do sort of a fritter or falafel kind of sandwich. I'm sure if you've had Greek food before, you've experienced things like that, and these work really well in those situations. So let's turn our attention back over here. And what you can do is use the spatula to flip underneath it and just peek at the bottom to see if they've browned. Okay, I'm actually going to give them maybe 20 more seconds or so. Like I mentioned, the browner they get at the bottom, the easier they are to just flip over to the other side. And I want to be successful when we do the flip. So we'll give them just a little bit more time. In terms of storage after you've made this, the yogurt dip stores really well in the refrigerator. Just put a lid on it, airtight container, and you're good to go. Same thing with the fritters. Put them in a separate airtight container. And then whenever you want to serve them again, you can microwave them to heat them back up. You can also eat them cold. I've always been a big fan of cold leftovers. So that's an option. So let's try to flip these and see if we can get it to work. Well, they're giving me a little bit of trouble. So you'll want to scoop them towards the edge of the pan. That's can to get underneath them. There. And this last guy is not quite cooperating. Okay. And what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to let those finish real quick. I want to show you what I made some earlier, and I can show you what this. So when I'm talking about that browning, you can see they almost come out looking like hash browns or like little sausages. They should have that nice browning on both sides of them. That'll let you know that they've been thoroughly cooked. And once it gets that, it holds together really well. I'm not worried about it crumbling or falling apart. So that was the goal that I was waiting on with those 3 there. Again, the technique for flipping them can be kind of tricky since they do tend to fall apart. Be patient with it. If you jab at them with the spatula too much, they might crumble. So try to slip it under there, press it towards the lip of the pan, and you'll be able to get under there and then just flip it in one smooth motion. So we cooked the first side. We're now cooking the second. If you have an electric stovetop, the second side tends to cook much faster because things have had time to heat up. So keep that in mind when you're doing your timing. I'm keeping an eye on these, and I think I'm actually probably going to go ahead and call it now. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so the second side, very, very quick by comparison. You can see some steam coming off of that probably. So we'll go ahead and scoop those guys out. And then if you'd like to, an option you have is to actually set these onto a paper towel whenever you first pull them out of here. If you're a little worried about the amount of oil, you can put them on a paper towel and it'll soak up some of the excess. But this is what they look like when they come out. So they're just little lentil patties. They are so good. They are deceptively good. If you had falafel, that is what I would compare it to. If you haven't, the outside texture reminds me of a hash brown. It's just that nice, like, fried, crispy flavor. But like I mentioned, it's packed with nothing but healthy stuff inside. The base is lentils, which is such a healthy food. Whereas something like hash browns, it's mostly just carbohydrates. The lentils have the fiber, they've got the protein. We're using healthy fats to create this, so it's a really good combination. At this point, like I mentioned, serve it on a bed of greens, put it in a pita pocket, maybe with some tomatoes and spinach in there. I could see that being really good. Or I'm going to pick up one that isn't fresh off the skillet because it'd be too hot. You can take them and you can just dip them in the yogurt sauce. And it's a really nice flavor combination. When these are hot, they're nice and crispy. The yogurt sauce you want to keep refrigerated so it'll be cool, and I think you get a fun temperature sensation there. So that's really it for these dishes. If you really want to make it look fancy, like the picture did at the beginning of today's presentation, you can always, it cracks me up when people do food photography because it looks so tasty, but it's not necessarily something you'd eat. But the picture had some cilantro sprinkled on top to make it look a little greener, so you can see those pops of color kind of making it look nicer. But of course, that's all for show. In terms of cooking, you've done everything that you need to do now, and you are all set to enjoy your red lentil fritters and your ginger yogurt sauce. When I mentioned adding it to the pita, you can absolutely take some of this yogurt sauce and stuff it inside of the pita. You can line the inside of it with a little bit and then put these in there. That's a really nice way to just combine those items. It makes it a little easier to take on the go with you if you wanted to take it to work or use just somewhere else where you need to be more mobile. So we are going to send out a copy of today's recipe. It'll include all the information, including soaking those red lentils in advance to get them nice and malleable enough to work in the food processor, as well as the nutrition profile. So you can see exactly how many calories, protein, carbs, and fat are in this recipe and see how it might fit into your daily lifestyle. Overall, though, it's a pretty simple recipe to make. The hardest part is really just flipping the falafel patties or the fritter patties there. But the rest of it comes together really well. I also think it's a good crowd pleaser. If you're having people over and you want to do little appetizers, making a couple of these and having people being able to dip them, it works really well for entertaining and that sort of thing. So I'm going to take a look at the chat here and just see if we have any specific questions. Okay, I did see someone asking about taking a closer look at them. I think that was while I was cooking. So hopefully you got a better look there, but I'll show it closer again. They've got a really nice color to them. You can see the scallions kind of peeking through with the red lentils mixed in there. They're very, very tasty. I see someone mentioned they might try it this weekend for a party. So yeah, absolutely. Like I said, it's fun for those sort of things, but you can also just have it as a meal. Anytime I make these recipes live here, I've made them in the past before and tried them myself. And I really liked it as a lunch, as a dinner. It's pretty filling too, because again, it's a good mix of protein, fat, and carbohydrates. So it's very nutritionally sound. I don't see any other questions here. So just again, as a reminder, we're going to send out a copy of the recipe and a link to the recording. And you'll also get a link to a quick survey where you can just let us know what you thought of today's session. If you've got ideas for things we could do to improve it, other recipes you might like to see in the future, any feedback like that, we'd love to hear it. Additionally, if you are not aware, we do events like this all the time. Our entire office is dedicated to well-being, not only at Georgia State University, but also for any of our USG well-being family members. So if you're attending the call today from another institution, we welcome you and we'd love to have you back at any of our future presentations. If you're not already on our mailing list, we send out a weekly list of all the events we'll be doing every Monday. And you can join that list by emailing us at edws@gsu.edu. And I'll actually ask if Tony could just put that in the chat real quick. It'll give you all the opportunity to see that email in case you want to be on the subscriber list. We do virtual workouts. We have our Fast Fun Fitness Friday class. We do our stretch breaks, yoga and meditation, our snack and share support group, and then other events like this. So again, if you're interested, definitely get on that mailing list. And tomorrow, Friday at 12 p.m., we'll actually be doing a guided meditation and yoga session. So if that's something you'd be interested in, we encourage you to join us for that. Thank you, Tony, for putting that email in the chat. Since there are no other questions at this point in time, I just want to thank everyone for attending today and hope you have a great rest of your day. I'm going to go eat this.